Starting off strong with number 1, and it goes to Palworld, the game that basically took the internet by storm when it dropped in early access and never really let go. At its core, Palworld is a creature collecting survival game where you roam a massive open world hunting down creatures called pals. What makes it stand out from the usual monster taming formula is how wild the mechanics get. You can put your pals to work building your base, farming resources, and yes, arming them with weapons in combat. The world itself is packed with biomes, dungeons, and boss encounters that keep the exploration loop fresh throughout your playthrough. Building mechanics sit alongside the creature collection in a way that feels surprisingly natural rather than bolted on. The progression curve is satisfying, and there is always something new to unlock, whether that is a new pal type, a base upgrade, or a new weapon tier. For a game that looked chaotic on the surface, it plays with a lot of polish.
Number 3 lands on Coromon, and if you grew up on the GBA era of Pokemon, this one is going to hit different. It is one of the most faithful love letters to classic monster collecting RPGs available on PC right now. You step into the role of a battle researcher, exploring a world threatened by ancient cores of corrupted energy. The stamina-based battle system adds a layer of resource management that keeps fights tense without overcomplicating things. The pixel art is crisp and detailed in a way that feels like a modern reimagining of the Game Boy Advance style, rather than a lazy throwback. There is a built-in Nuzlocke mode for players who want a challenge run, and a randomizer option that dramatically extends replayability. The story has enough twists to stay engaging beyond the early hours, and the monster roster is varied enough to support different team compositions. It is a lean, well-crafted game that does not overstay its welcome.
Fourth up is Monster Sanctuary, and this one earns its spot by doing something genuinely different with the creature collecting formula. The exploration here is handled as a Metroidvania, meaning you move through a connected map and unlock new areas as your monster roster gains new abilities. Each creature has a detailed skill tree that lets you specialize your team in very specific ways, creating builds that reward experimentation. The battle system stacks buffs and combos in a way that looks chaotic, but becomes deeply satisfying once you understand the synergies at play. There is also a proper PvP mode for those who want to test their builds against other players. The monster designs lean darker and more intricate than the usual cute creature aesthetic, which gives the game a distinct personality. It is the kind of game where the more you put in, the more you get out. And for players who enjoy optimizing team compositions, it can become genuinely absorbing over a long playthrough.
5 brings us to Nexomon Extinction, a game that wears its Pokemon inspiration openly, but manages to carve out its own identity through sheer world-building charm. The setting is a collapsing world where ancient tyrant monsters have declared war on humanity, and you join the Tamers Guild to push back. There are over 300 Nexomon to find and catch across a surprisingly varied world, with different climates, factions, and storylines feeding into the main campaign. The tone balances its apocalyptic premise with genuinely funny writing and memorable NPC interactions that keep the mood from getting too heavy. The battle system is familiar enough to feel comfortable, but has enough of its own rhythm to distinguish itself from a straight clone. Side quests and optional areas add plenty of runtime without padding the experience unnecessarily. At its price on Steam, it represents exceptional value for the amount of game on offer, and it works well for players coming fresh to the genre and veterans alike. 6 is Temtem, the game that dared to ask what Pokemon would look like as a full online multiplayer experience. Set across the airborne archipelago, you travel between 6 distinct floating islands catching and training Temtem, while working through a story campaign centered on dismantling the villainous Clan Belsodo. The creature designs are among the strongest in the genre, with some standing up favorably against classic first-generation Pokemon in terms of visual appeal and memorability. The co-op system lets you run the entire campaign with a friend, which is a feature the genre has desperately needed for years. Competitive play is well-structured, with a pick-and-ban system that keeps high-level matches strategic. Housing customization and wardrobe options add depth beyond the core battling loop. The game received a full release after a strong early access period, and represents one of the most complete Pokemon-style experiences available on Steam today.
Number 7 goes to Moonstone Island, a game that feels like what you would get if Stardew Valley and Pokemon had a cozy, low-stakes baby. You play as an alchemist in training, dropped onto one of over 100 procedurally generated floating islands, and your job is to explore, farm, collect spirit creatures, and build a life. The spirit battles use a deck-building system rather than traditional turn-based commands, which adds variety without overwhelming the relaxed pacing. Romance options, seasonal festivals, and friendship mechanics with island residents give the life sim side of things real substance. Each island you discover has its own visual theme and set of resources to harvest, which keeps the exploration loop rewarding across many hours of play. The art style is warm and inviting, with a hand-drawn quality that suits the cozy tone perfectly. For players who want the creature collecting hook wrapped in something slower and more personal, this is one of the best options on the platform. 8 is Digimon Storytime Stranger, a title that doesn't just ride on nostalgia, but builds a legitimately strong RPG experience around it. The core hook is a time manipulation mechanic, where the era you are fighting in affects how your Digimon evolve, creating a strategic layer that influences team building in meaningful ways. There are over 450 Digimon to collect, and the roster spans multiple generations of the franchise, with each one feeling meaningfully different in how it performs in battle. The story campaign is lengthy and raises the stakes consistently, delivering a narrative that takes itself seriously enough to remain engaging across the full runtime. Challenge difficulty is notably higher than most games in this genre, which rewards players who enjoy learning systems deeply rather than coasting through on default settings. Visually, it leans into pixel art with strong animated effects in battle. It currently holds a higher user score on Metacritic than many contemporary Pokemon titles, which speaks to the quality of the overall package.
Landing at 9 is Monster Hunter Stories 2: Wings of Ruin, Capcom's RPG spin-off that swaps real-time action combat for a turn-based system built around monster eggs and rider bonds. You play as a rider who steals eggs from monster nests and hatches them into companions called Monsties. The type triangle of power, speed, and technical attacks keeps battles accessible while leaving room for strategic depth through gene inheritance and team composition. The world is visually spectacular and draws from the rich creature design library of the mainline Monster Hunter series, giving you access to some genuinely iconic beasts as partners. The campaign runs well over 40 hours, and the side mission content extends that considerably for completionist players. Gene Inheritance lets you customize your Monsties in ways that border on the deeply complex if you choose to engage with it fully. It is one of the highest production value entries in this genre on Steam, and plays beautifully with a controller.
10 is Chained Echoes, a game that channels classic 16-bit RPG energy in a way that feels earned rather than nostalgic for its own sake. While not a pure creature collector, it features a monster taming mechanic alongside a sprawling traditional RPG structure set in a world constantly at war. The combat uses an overdrive gauge that punishes passive play and rewards aggressive rotation through your skill set, making fights dynamic even after many hours. The class system lets characters shift roles, and the customization depth rivals much more expensive releases. The writing is one of the highlights, delivering a story that takes real turns and does not shy away from darker themes. The pixel art is meticulous, and the soundtrack is consistently excellent. It was created almost entirely by a single developer, which makes the scope and quality even more remarkable. For players who want a deep RPG experience on a budget, this is one of the best value purchases available on the platform.
11 brings Slime Rancher 2 into the picture, which leans into the creature collection angle from a first-person resource management perspective. You play as Beatrix LeBeau exploring Rainbow Island, using a vacuum gun to capture and farm colorful slimes across a vibrant open world. Largo slimes, formed by combining two types, create new resource outputs and add variety to your ranching setup as you expand. The loop of exploring, collecting, upgrading your conservatory, and discovering new areas is genuinely relaxing without being boring. The visual design is bright and cheerful in a way that makes the world a pleasure to spend time in. Resource management and base building give the game more mechanical depth than the cute aesthetic might suggest at first glance. It currently sits in early access, but is content-rich and already delivers a satisfying, complete feeling experience. It works as both a casual play session game and something you can sink real hours into when you want to optimize your slime operation. 12 is Yokai Watch 4, a monster collecting RPG from Level 5 that brings its long-running franchise to PC with a real-time action battle system that sets it apart from the turn-based standard of the genre. You build a team of yokai spirits from Japanese folklore and mythology, each one with distinct abilities and a fully realized personality. The friendship mechanics go deep, with individual yokai having preferences and relationships that affect how they perform alongside each other. Multiple playable characters with their own story arcs give the main campaign unusual narrative variety for the genre. The world design is grounded in everyday Japanese suburban settings, mixed with supernatural encounters, creating a tonal contrast that gives the game real character. Side content is abundant, and the game rewards long-term engagement with its roster of over 300 collectible yokai. The real-time combat adds urgency that fans of more action-oriented play will appreciate over the slower pace of traditional turn-based monster games. 13 lands on Siralim Ultimate, a game designed specifically for players who want the deepest possible creature customization system available in the genre. You summon and breed creatures called Siralim from hundreds of available options, and build teams with synergies that can become extraordinarily complex as you progress. The procedurally generated dungeon system means there is effectively no end to the content, with the game scaling to whatever depth you want to take it. Artifact crafting, trait breeding, and spell crafting systems layer on top of each other to create a build optimization experience unlike anything else in the genre. The visual presentation is simple but functional, and the focus is entirely on systems depth rather than spectacle. It is not a game that holds your hand, and newcomers may find the early hours steep, but players who enjoy min-maxing team compositions will find the ceiling essentially unlimited. For a budget price, it delivers more mechanical content than games costing several times as much.
14 is Amber Isle, a creature-collecting life sim hybrid that draws clear inspiration from both Pokemon and Animal Crossing. You arrive on an island and begin building up a community by befriending and relocating wild creatures to your settlement. The building and decoration systems are given real depth, letting you shape the island layout and structures to your own vision. Creature interactions feel alive, with each one having preferences, schedules, and moods that shift over time. The battle system is present, but secondary to the exploration and community building loop, making it a good pick for players who want the creature collection hook without heavy combat emphasis. Seasonal events and weather systems add variety to the daily rhythm of play. The art style is warm and approachable, with strong creature designs that feel original rather than derivative. It sits comfortably in the space between a cozy life sim and a traditional creature collector, and executes both sides competently.
15 brings Witchspring R, an RPG with a creature collecting thread running through its core that builds around a witch protagonist exploring a world hostile to her kind. You brew potions, train stats through daily activity, and collect elemental creatures that fight alongside you in turn-based encounters. The intimacy of the story is a standout quality, focusing tightly on its central character and her relationships, rather than sprawling toward an epic scale. Stat growth through repeated practice, rather than level grinding, gives the progression a rhythm that feels tangibly earned. The creature companions are charming, and their visual designs fit the European folk magic aesthetic of the world consistently. Dungeon exploration has a light puzzle element alongside the combat encounters. It originally launched on mobile before coming to PC, and that origin shows in its concise structure, but the overall experience translates well to a longer sit-down play session and rewards players who engage with its quieter storytelling.
16 goes to EvoCreo, which takes direct visual and mechanical cues from the GBA Pokemon era and lands as a compact, solid creature-taming RPG. You explore the world of Zenith, catch creatures called Creo, and pursue a story involving a missing father and a shadowy organization pulling strings behind the scenes. The type matchup system follows familiar patterns, and the turn-based battles move at a brisk pace that keeps the momentum up during long play sessions. The regional dex is large enough to support varied team building throughout the campaign, without overwhelming new players. It made the jump from mobile to PC and brings a surprisingly deep crafting and equipment system that adds a layer of customization not typical in the genre. The pixel art is clean, and the creature designs land between nostalgic and original in a way that works in its favor. For budget-conscious players wanting a full creature RPG experience, it delivers solid value without unnecessary padding.
17 is Beyond Galaxyland, a sci-fi monster RPG that follows a high schooler named Doug who gets abducted by aliens and must travel across the galaxy to save Earth alongside his guinea pig and a robot companion. The monster collection here comes through alien creature encounters across different planets, each with its own visual identity and creature roster. The battle system blends creature commands with direct character actions in a way that adds tactical variety. The humor is present throughout, and the writing leans into the absurdity of its premise without losing genuine emotional beats in the later story. The alien world designs are imaginative and visually diverse, making exploration genuinely rewarding rather than repetitive. It occupies a unique space in the genre by blending the creature collector structure with a stronger emphasis on narrative and character work than most of its peers. The tone and aesthetic set it apart clearly from anything else in this list. 18 lands on Beastieball, which approaches the creature collecting premise through a sports RPG lens. You recruit creatures and train them to compete in a volleyball-style sport called Beastieball rather than traditional battle combat. The sport mechanics are genuinely well designed and bring a real-time action element to what would otherwise be a turn-based genre staple. Creature recruitment involves scouting and negotiation rather than catching, which shifts the relationship dynamic in an interesting direction. Each creature has a personality that affects how they interact with teammates, and team chemistry becomes a meaningful factor in competitive performance. The progression curve rewards long-term investment in your roster, and the higher-level matches become legitimately challenging strategic encounters. The aesthetic is colorful, and the creature designs are inventive, with a visual language distinct from anything else currently in the genre. For players burned out on traditional battle structures, it is a fresh take worth trying. 19 is Ooblets, a creature-collecting farming sim that sits firmly on the cozy end of the spectrum. You arrive in the town of Badget Town and begin growing ooblets from seeds, tending your farm and challenging other ooblet trainers to dance battles rather than combat. The dance battles use a card-based system where you play moves to fill your side of the floor, replacing violence with synchronized chaos in a way that feels genuinely fresh. Farming, decorating your home, completing town quests, and befriending residents all layer into a daily loop that is easy to fall into for extended sessions. The writing is playful with a self-aware humor that runs through every dialogue interaction. Visually, it is soft and round with a toy box color palette that commits fully to its identity. It released in full after a lengthy early access period, and the final version represents a polished and complete experience. It targets a similar audience to Stardew Valley, but with the creature collection hook as its central feature. 20 brings us Ara History Untold, a title that incorporates creature and leader collection within a grand strategy framework set across human history. You build civilizations and recruit historical leaders as characters with unique abilities, which provides a different flavor of the collecting instinct that drives the genre. The system's depth is considerable, and the strategic layer rewards players who enjoy long-term planning and empire management alongside their collecting. Each era of history introduces new mechanics and challengers that keep the progression from feeling repetitive over what can become very long play sessions. The production value is high for an indie-adjacent release, and the historical detail embedded into the gameplay design is evident throughout. It occupies an unusual position in this list because the creature collecting parallel is structural rather than literal, but the core gameplay loop of acquiring, upgrading, and deploying unique collectible units translates the appeal cleanly. 21 is Revomon, a blockchain-based creature collecting RPG that takes the Pokemon formula into a virtual reality and open-world setting. Players capture, train, and battle Revomons across different biomes in a world designed for deep exploration. The creature roster is diverse, with each Revomon having distinct elemental typing and evolution paths. The battle system is real-time, rather than turn-based, which adds an action layer that distinguishes it mechanically from its genre peers. The open-world approach means you can encounter different creature types based on location and time of day, rewarding patient players who explore thoroughly. Visual quality is solid for an independent creature collecting title, and the creature designs are original, with strong elemental visual theming. The game has an active development team continuing to push updates, and the content volume reflects that ongoing commitment to expanding the experience. 22 is Crypt of the NecroDancer, which sits at an unusual crossroads of rhythm game and dungeon crawler, with creature elements woven into its combat structure. You move and attack to the beat of the soundtrack, and the entire encounter design is built around rhythmic input timing. Creature encounters follow the same beat-locked rules, and the challenge of maintaining rhythm while managing positioning in a dungeon layout creates a completely unique gameplay feel. The soundtrack is genuinely excellent, and the ability to replace it with your own music library adds lasting replayability. Multiple characters with different movement and combat rules provide replay variety beyond the base experience. The visual presentation is colorful and readable, even during hectic sequences. It has spawned a follow-up and a Zelda crossover, which speaks to the strength of its core design. For players who want something mechanically unlike anything else in this roundup, it is the most distinct entry on the list.
23 is Monster Crown, a dark take on the creature collecting RPG that sets its tone apart from the genre's usual lighthearted presentation. The world of Crown Island is a grim place, where monsters are bound through packs rather than captured in friendly balls, and the narrative leans into moral ambiguity across its story branches. There are over 200 base monsters to collect, and a breeding system that lets you create hybrid monsters with combined traits, pushing the roster into the thousands of possible combinations. The pixel art carries a darker color palette that fits the tone, and the creature designs lean towards unsettling rather than cute. Multiple story endings based on the choices you make throughout the campaign give it meaningful replayability for players who want to see every branch. The battle system is turn-based with standard type mechanics, but the breeding depth adds a layer of strategy to team building that extends the engagement well beyond a single playthrough.
24 brings Sacrifire, a dark fantasy RPG with a creature companion system at its heart, and a narrative built around sacrifice and moral consequence. You travel with demon companions whose fates are tied to the choices you make across the story, adding weight to every major decision. The turn-based battle system is stylish with strong visual effects, and the individual companion abilities create meaningful team-building decisions. The art style is high-quality hand-drawn work with a dark aesthetic that stands out clearly from the brighter visual tone most creature collecting games default to. Dialogue and character writing are among the strongest elements, and the story takes its premise seriously enough to land emotional moments throughout. Boss encounters are well designed and represent a genuine challenge that rewards understanding the battle system deeply. The runtime is focused rather than padded, and the overall experience feels like a complete artistic statement rather than a featureless checklist.
Closing out the list at 25 is a final pick worth every penny for fans of the genre who want a complete package on a budget. The slate of games above covers the full spectrum, from cozy life sims to competitive battlers to dark narrative RPGs, all delivering on the core appeal of creature collection that made Pokémon a cultural institution. Whether your preference is deep strategy, relaxed farming, real-time action, or old-school pixel RPG design, Steam in 2026 has a version of that experience ready and waiting at a price that will not hurt your wallet.